Pain exploded through Margot Holloway's body like shattered glass. Her eyes cracked open to a world tilted sideways. Pine needles pressed against her cheek. Blood dripped into her left eye, warm and sticky. She tried to move her leg and screamed. The sound died in her throat when she heard voices above. Is she dead? A woman's voice, sharp, impatient. Can you see her body? Margot's breath caught. That was Desiree. Her daughter-in-law. I can't see anything. A man's voice shaking, breaking. There's too much brush. She fell all the way down. No one could survive that fall. That voice belonged to Hector. Her son, her baby boy. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Margot pressed her hand over her mouth, trapping the sob trying to escape. Her ribs screamed with every breath. Something sharp moved inside her chest. Broken bones. She'd been a nurse for 40 years. She knew what broken ribs felt like. Check anyway. Desiree's voice again, harder this time. Cold as January ice. Climb down and make sure she's dead. Dead. The word hung in the mountain air like smoke. I can't. Hector's voice cracked. The rocks are too loose. I'll fall too. Silence. Then footsteps. 2 sets, walking away, leaving her. Margot lay perfectly still on the narrow ledge that had saved her life. 40 feet down a 200-foot cliff, hidden by pine trees and brush, invisible from above. Her left leg bent at an angle that made her stomach turn. 3 fingers on her right hand pointed the wrong direction. Blood pooled beneath her head. But she was alive, and she had just heard her son and his wife discuss her murder. 5 hours later, Hector sat in a police station in Kalispell, Montana. His phone buzzed on the metal table. Unknown number. He hit decline. The phone buzzed again. Same number. He declined again. Desiree sat beside him, her designer purse clutched in her lap like a shield. Her mascara had run perfectly, just enough to look concerned, not enough to look ugly. She'd practiced that in the car. Mr. Mendoza, the officer said, looking up from his computer. We have rangers searching the trails now. When exactly did you notice your mother was missing? 2 o'clock. Hector's voice sounded hollow. We stopped at the overlook at mile marker 4. She wanted to take pictures. We walked ahead maybe 20 yards. When we turned around, she was gone. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Hector reached for it. Desiree's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into his skin. Who keeps calling you? Her voice had an edge sharp enough to cut. I don't know. Hector pulled his hand away, stared at the phone. It buzzed again in his palm like something alive. Something angry. The officer's radio crackled. We found something at Montana General Hospital. Patient came in 2 hours ago. Helicopter rescue from Glacier. Matches the description. Hector's hand froze over the P. Hone. His face drained of color so fast the officer leaned forward, concerned. The phone buzzed one more time. Hector answered it. Hello, son. The voice on the other end was calm, familiar, impossible. His mother's voice. Margot Holloway had spent 73 years believing family was everything. She'd learned that lesson early, clutched it close, built her entire life around it. Family didn't abandon you. Family didn't betray you. Family was the one thing in this world you could count on. She'd learned it the hard way at 3 years old when her own mother died of cancer. Her father had raised her alone, working double shifts at the lumber mill, his hands always rough and covered in sawdust. He'd taught her that you sacrificed for the people you loved. You worked until your body screamed. You gave everything, so that's what Margot did. She became a nurse at 22, married a man named Rafael Mendoza at 24, had Hector at 26. Watched Rafael walk out the door when Hector turned 3, his boots leaving tracks in the snow that led away from their small house and never came back. Margot didn't cry. She couldn't afford to. Hector needed diapers and formula and a mother who didn't fall apart. She picked up extra shifts at the hospital, worked nights, weekends, holidays. Christmas mornings found her checking 4 bags while other mothers opened presents. Thanksgiving dinners came from the hospital cafeteria, eaten cold at 2 a.m. between patients' Hect. Orr's birthday parties happened in hospital break rooms, with nurses singing off-key and cake from the vending machine. But Hector never went hungry, never wore clothes that didn't fit, never missed a field trip because his mother couldn't afford it. He was a beautiful baby, all dark curls and huge brown eyes that looked at Margot like she hung the moon. He grew into a beautiful boy, smart, funny, kind, the type of kid who stopped to help elderly neighbors carry groceries, who shared his lunch with kids who forgot theirs, who called his mother every Sunday without fail. By 35, Hector had built something impressive, a career in pharmaceutical sales that took him to conferences in Denver and Seattle, a house in Billings with a 2-car garage and a lawn he mowed himself, a closet full of suits that cost more than Margot's monthly mortgage. Margot watched him climb and felt nothing but pride. Her son, the boy she'd raised alone, the man who'd never asked for handouts, who'd made something of himself through hard work and determination. He called her every week, visited twice a month, brought groceries and fixed things around her house without being asked. The bathroom sink, the front step, the window that stuck. They were close, or Margot thought they were. Then Hector met Desiree Fontaine. The name itself sounded expensive, like champagne in country clubs and things Margot had only seen in movies. Desiree swept into Hector's life on a Tuesday in March. Margot Ray remembered the exact date, because Hector had been supposed to visit that day. He'd canceled 20 minutes before arriving, said something came up, something important. That something was a woman with legs that went on forever and hair the color of honey in sunlight, a woman who came from the kind of money that bought senators and summer homes in the Hamptons, old money, the kind that looked down on people who worked for a living. Margot met her 6 weeks later at a restaurant in Billings. Desiree wore a dress that probably cost more than Margot's car. Diamond earrings caught the light when she turned her head. Her handshake was cold and brief, like touching something dead. So lovely to finally meet you. Desiree's smile never reached her eyes. Hector talks about you constantly. It was a lie. Margot knew it was a lie, but she smiled anyway and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu and pretended not to notice the way Desiree's gaze swept over her second-hand sweater and discount store shoes. 6 months later, they were engaged. The engagement party happened at the Fontaine estate, 15 acres of manicured lawns and a house that looked like something out of a magazine. Margot received a formal invitation in the mail, cream-colored cardstock with gold lettering, the kind you needed to please reply to. She wasn't involved in the planning, wasn't asked about venues or flowers or music, just shown up where and when the invitation told her to. The wedding came a year later. 300 guests in a cathedral that echoed, an orchestra, a dress with a train so long it needed its own attendants. Margot sat in the 3rd row, surrounded by strangers in designer clothes who whispered behind their programs about the groom's mother and her off-the-rack dress from Macy's. Hector barely looked at her during the ceremony. His eyes stayed locked on Desiree, who glowed like something carved from marble and honey. That's when the changes really started. Hector's phone calls dropped from weekly to monthly, then to every other month, then to texts, short ones, busy with work, talk soon. His visits stopped entirely. Too far to drive, he said. Too much going on. When Margot called him, Desiree answered half the time. Oh, he's in a meeting. I'll have him call you back. He never did. The few times they did see each other, Desiree came along. She'd walk through Margot's small house like she was touring a museum of poverty. Her fingers would trail over things, the worn couch, the outdated kitchen counters, the photos in drugstore frames, and her nose would wrinkle just slightly. This is quaint, she'd say, very rustic, like living in the past. Margot would smile and offer coffee. Desiree would decline. I only drink organic fair trade from this specific roaster in Seattle. But thank you. Hector would sit at the kitchen table and avoid his mother's eyes. His shoulders hunched like he was trying to make himself smaller, invisible. Margot told herself this was normal. Sons grew up, got married, started their own lives. She'd done her job, raised him right. Now she needed to let go. But late at night, alone in her house, she'd stare at photos of little Hector, the boy who'd climbed into her lap after bad dreams, who'd brought her dandelions picked from the yard, who'd told her she was the best mom in the world. She wondered where that boy had gone. Desiree Fontaine had been planning this from the first moment she saw Hector Mendoza. Not marriage, not love, something much more calculated. She'd spotted him at a pharmaceutical conference in Denver. Tall, handsome, successful enough to be useful but not successful enough to be difficult. The kind of man who could be molded, shaped, controlled. Within 5 minutes of conversation, she knew 3 important things. He came from nothing, he was desperate to escape that nothing, and he had a mother he called every Sunday. That last part was the key. Desiree came from money so old it had forgotten where it came from. Her great-great-grandfather had built railroads. Her grandfather had invested in oil. Her father sat on boards and made phone calls that moved millions. They lived in a world where people like Margot Holloway cleaned toilets and emptied bedpans. Hector's working-class background was a problem, but Desiree had learned from her mother that problems could be assets if you knew how to use them. And Margot Holloway, sweet, simple, poor Margot, could be very useful. The manipulation started small. Over breakfast 3 months into dating, Desiree mentioned a colleague's comment. "Richard asked about your family last night. I didn't know what to say." Hector looked up from his eggs. "What do you mean?" "He asked where your parents lived, what they did." Desiree added cream to her coffee, stirring slowly. "I told him your father wasn't in the picture and your mother was retired. I didn't mention the nursing home work. She was a nurse," Hector corrected. "At a hospital." "Of course." Desiree smiled, sipped her coffee. Let the silence do the work. A week later, at a dinner party with her parents, she mentioned it again. "Hector's mother is the sweetest woman. Very humble. She still shops at thrift stores." "Can you imagine?" Her mother's eyebrow had lifted, just slightly. "How resourceful." The word hung in the air like spoiled meat. After that, the comments came faster. Always casual, always concerned. "Your boss mentioned his family has a house in Aspen. What would you even say if he asked about your family's properties?" "The Vanderbilts are coming to dinner next week. They'll want to know about your background." "Should I just be vague?" "Darling, I love that you're self-made, but sometimes I worry people will think less of you because of where you came from." Each comment was a small cut, individually harmless. Together, they bled Hector dry. 6 months into the marriage, Desiree started talking about money. Their money. Or the lack of it. She'd married Hector knowing he was comfortable but not wealthy. What she hadn't told him was that her trust fund didn't fully unlock until she turned 40. She was 32. Her parents gave her an allowance. Generous by normal standards, insulting by Fontaine standards. Maintaining the lifestyle expected of a Fontaine required serious money. Money Hector didn't have. Desiree had expensive tastes. Designer clothes, first-class travel, country club memberships, cars that cost more than most people's houses. She'd grown up with these things. She wasn't about to give them up. So she spent. And spent. And spent. Credit cards maxed out, loans taken, lines of credit opened in Hector's name without his knowledge. By their first anniversary, they were $200,000 in debt. Desiree showed him the statements one night over wine, watched his face go pale. "How did this happen?" His hands shook as he flipped through pages of charges. "We have a certain standard to maintain." Desiree's voice was calm, reasonable. "My family expects it. Your colleagues notice. These things matter. We can't afford this." "I know." She moved closer, put her hand on his. "That's why we need to think creatively about solutions." She let that sit, waited. "What kind of solutions?" Hector asked. Desiree stood, walked to the window, looked out at the view she'd insisted they could afford. "My grandmother left everything to charity when she died. 50 milli. On dollars, gone, because she thought her children only loved her for her money." Hector said nothing. "Your mother must have savings," Desiree continued, her tone light, casual. "All those years of nursing, working overtime, she never remarried, never traveled. Where did all that money go?" "She spent it on me, on raising me." "Of course." Desiree turned, smiled. "But people that age, they hide money. My financial advisor says it's common. They don't trust banks. They keep cash, bonds, things they don't tell anyone about." It wasn't true. Margot had maybe 30,000 in a savings account. Enough for emergencies, nothing more. But Desiree had a gift for making lies sound like facts. Over the next year, she planted more seeds, watered them with carefully, crafted stories and manufactured evidence. I ran into someone who knew your mother at the hospital. They said she was famous for picking up extra shifts. Do you know how much overtime pays, especially over 40 years? The house she lives in is worth at least $200,000 now. Montana real estate is booming. When did she buy it? 1985. She probably paid $30,000. That's a huge profit. She must have life insurance. Everyone her age does. Have you ever asked, how much? Each question was innocent. Each one dug deeper. Hector started visiting Margot with new eyes, calculating eyes. He noticed things he'd never paid attention to before. The house that was paid off, the car that ran fine but was old, the clothes that were clean but outdated. His mother lived simply, frugally, like someone hoarding money. At least, that's what Desiree wanted him to believe. Have you thought about your will? He asked Margot one Sunday afternoon. They were sitting at her kitchen table, coffee between them. You should have something in writing. Margot laughed. I'm not planning on going anywhere anytime soon, honey. I know, but... Hector shifted, couldn't meet her eyes. You should have things organized. For when the time comes, everything I have is yours anyway. Margot patted his hand. You know that. She meant it as comfort, as reassurance. Hector heard it as confirmation that she was hiding something. He reported back to Desiree that night. She said everything is mine. See? Desiree smiled, poured more wine. She has something. We just need to figure out what and how much. The questions continued over months. Innocent, probing. Do you have any insurance policies I should know about? Has that property been appraised recently? Whatever happened to Dad's pension? You must have gotten something when he left the railroad. Rafael Mendoza had never worked for the railroad. He'd been a line cook who disappeared with his waitress girlfriend. No pension, no nothing. But Margot was too kind to correct her son, too trusting to see what was really happening. She just smiled and said she was fine. Everything was handled. Don't worry about me. And all the while, Desiree was planning. Late one night in January, Desiree pulled out her laptop and started researching. Hiking trails, national parks, places in Montana with beautiful views and dangerous cliffs. Glacier National Park appeared on her screen. Miles of trails, stunning overlooks, remote areas where cell service disappeared and hikers went missing every year. She found what she was looking for at mile marker 4 on the Grinnell Glacier Trail. An overlook with a 200-foot drop, no guardrail, no witnesses for miles. Perfect. She showed the pictures to Hector the next morning. We should take your mother on a trip, somewhere beautiful. A gesture of goodwill. Hector looked at the photos, mountains and sky and that long, long drop. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Desiree's hand found his shoulder, massaged gently. She loves hiking. She talks about it all the time. Margot had mentioned hiking once. 10 years ago. In passing. It would mean so much to her, Desiree continued. Quality time with her son. And honestly, at her age, who knows how many more chances we'll have. That last part was true. Margot was 73. Healthy for her age, but not immortal. Hector hesitated. Something in his chest twisted. Wrong. This felt wrong. We can't afford a trip right now. Desiree pulled out her phone, showed him their bank account, the one she'd been quietly draining. We can't afford not to. Look at this, Hector. We're drowning. The house is being Aura closed. The cars will be repossessed. We'll lose everything. The numbers swam before his eyes. Negative balances, overdue notices, collections warnings. Unless, Desiree whispered, her breath warm against his ear, unless something changes, unless we had a sudden financial relief from someone who loves you, who'd want you to be secure. She never said the words. Never had to. The human mind is a strange thing. It can justify almost anything if the pressure is high enough. If the fear is great enough. If someone you trust tells you it's the only way. Hector looked at those numbers and felt himself drowning. Looked at his wife and saw his only lifeline. Looked at the future and saw nothing but ruin. He made the call to his mother the next day. Mom? I was thinking maybe we could take a trip together. Just the three of us. Glacier National Park, do some hiking. Bond. On the other end of the line, Margot's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? Oh, honey, I'd love that. Her joy was a knife in his chest, But Hector pushed it down, locked it away, told himself this was necessary, this was survival. Desiree stood beside him, her hand on his back, her smile sharp as broken glass. The trap was set. Margot Holloway couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this happy. Her son wanted to spend time with her. Real time. Not a quick coffee or an awkward dinner where Desiree checked her phone every 5 minutes. A whole weekend, hiking, talking, being a family. She went to the outdoor store in town and bought new hiking boots. They cost $87, money she didn't really have to spare, but this was important. This was her son. The night before the trip, she couldn't sleep. She packed and repacked her small backpack. Sandwiches made with good bread from the bakery. Homemade cookies. Her old camera that still used film because she'd never learned how the digital ones worked. She laid out her clothes. The boots. A jacket she'd had for 15 years but kept in good condition. Everything ready. At 4 a.m. she gave up on sleep and made coffee. Sat at her kitchen table watching the sun come up over the mountains. Thought about Hector as a little boy. How he used to wake her up at dawn wanting to watch cartoons. How she'd pretend to be annoyed but secretly loved those quiet morning moments. BR. When had that stopped? When had he grown too old for cartoons and sunrise coffee with his mom? Somewhere along the way she'd lost him. Maybe this trip would bring him back. The doorbell rang at 6 a.m. sharp. Margot grabbed her pack and rushed to the door, already smiling. Hector stood on her porch looking tired, thinner than she remembered, dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't been sleeping. "You okay, honey?" Margot reached up to touch his face. He stepped back, just slightly, just enough. "Fine, ready to go?" Desiree sat in the passenger seat of their SUV, designer sunglasses hiding her eyes even though the sun wasn't up yet. She didn't get out, didn't help load Margot's pack, just sat there scrolling through her phone. Margot climbed into the back seat, buckled in, tried to catch Hector's eye in the rearview mirror. He wouldn't look at her. The drive to Glacier took 3 hours. Margot talked to fill the silence, pointed out landmarks, shared stories from Hector's childhood. "Remember when we drove this way to visit Aunt Rosa? Remember that time we saw the moose?" Hector said nothing. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. Desiree's phone buzzed constantly. Text after text. She'd type responses and smile, that sharp smile. Margot told herself everything was fine. They were just tired. Once they started hiking, things would be better. They parked at the Grinnell Glacier trailhead at 9:15 a.m. The parking lot was nearly empty. Too early in the season for heavy crowds. Too cold for casual hikers. Perfect, Desiree had thought when she planned this. No witnesses. Margot shouldered her pack and stretched. The morning air was crisp and clean. Pine trees towered overhead. In the distance, mountains touched clouds. "This is beautiful," she breathed. Hector stood beside the car, staring at the trail marker. His phone was in his hand. Desiree's last text still on the screen, mile marker 4. "You know what to do?" "Hector?" Margot touched his arm. "You coming?" He flinched, shoved the phone in his pocket. "Yeah, let's go." They hiked in silence. Margot tried to pee up, but her legs weren't what they used to be. 73 years of living had taken their toll. Her knees ached. Her back protested the weight of the pack. But she pushed forward, didn't complain, didn't want to slow them down. Desiree led the way, her expensive hiking gear spotless and new. She'd bought it specifically for this trip. Would return it all tomorrow with tags still attached. Hector walked in the middle. His eyes stayed on the ground, on his feet, anywhere but his mother struggling behind him. At mile marker 3, Margot had to stop, catch her breath. Her chest hurt, her pulse hammered in her ears. "You okay, Mom?" Hector's voice sounded hollow, distant. "Fine, just need a minute." She leaned against a tree, smiled up at him. "Not as young as I used to be." Desiree checked her watch. We should keep moving, only 1 more mile to the overlook. 1 more mile to the spot she'd marked on her map. The spot with no guardrail and a 200-foot drop. They reached mile marker 4 at 11:47 a.m. The overlook opened up before them like a painting. Mountains stretched forever. A glacier gleamed in the distance. Rivers carved through valleys far below. Margot stopped at the edge, set down her pack, pulled out her camera. "This is incredible," she whispered. Behind her, Desiree pulled out her phone, started recording. She stood 20 feet back, far enough to stay out of frame, close enough to capture what was about to happen. She told Hector she would. And watch. Couldn't watch. But she needed the video. For proof, for their timeline, for the story they'd tell police later. Margot turned her back to the cliff, raised her camera to photograph the trail they'd just climbed. She was smiling. That's when she saw her son's face. Hector stood 3 feet away. His expression was wrong, all wrong. His eyes were empty, his jaw set, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He looked like a stranger. Hector? Margot lowered the camera slowly. What's wrong, honey? He took a step forward, then another. Margot's nurse instincts kicked in. Something was very wrong. She'd seen this look before. On patients having psychotic breaks. On people not in control of themselves. Hector, talk to me. She reached for him. His hands shot out. One push. All it took. One push from the son she'd sacrificed everything for. And Margot Holloway fell backward over the edge of the cliff. The world tilted. Sky and stone switched places. Her camera flew from her hands. Her scream caught in her throat. She fell, and fell, and fell. 200 feet of empty air. Rocks and death waiting below. This was how it ended. This was how she'd die. Her son had just murdered her. The impact came sudden and brutal, but wrong. Not hard enough. Not final enough. Margot hit a ledge 40 feet down, a narrow shelf of rock and earth invisible from above, hidden by pine trees and thick brush. A geographic accident. A miracle that felt more like a curse. She landed on her left side, her leg bent at an angle that made no sense. The snap echoed in her ears louder than her scream. Her ribs cracked like ice breaking. 3 of them. She'd counted the sounds. Her head bounced off rock, blood warm and immediate. Fingers on her right hand twisted wrong, broken. Pain exploded everywhere at once, white hot, consuming. Her vision went dark. Unconsciousness pulled at her like a tide. But before the darkness took her, she heard voices above. Is she dead? Desiree's voice. Urgent, sharp. Can you see her body? Hector's breathing was ragged, panicked. I can't see anything. There's too much brush. She fell all the way down. Climb down and check. I can't. The rocks are too loose. I'll fall too. Silence. Then Desiree again, her voice colder now, businesslike. Fine. We stick to the story. She wandered off to take photos. We searched for hours. By the time we get help, it'll be too late anyway. Margot's hand clamped over her mouth, trapping the sound trying to escape, trapping the sob, the scream, the betrayal. Her son had tried to kill her. Her son and his wife had planned this, had hiked her out to this remote cliff, had pushed her to her death. Except she wasn't dead. The voices above faded, footsteps retreating, getting quieter, gone. Margot lay perfectly still, counting her injuries with the methodical precision of a woman who'd spent 4 decades in emergency rooms. Left leg, compound fracture, tibia and fibula both broken, bone visible through torn skin, bleeding but not arterial. She could survive this if she controlled the shock. Ribs, 3 broken on the left side, maybe 4. Breathing hurt, but she was getting air. No pneumothorax, yet. Right hand, 3 fingers broken. Ring finger, middle finger, pinky. Useless for gripping but not life-threatening. Head, laceration above left eyebrow. Concussion likely. Vision blurred. Could be serious. Could be fatal if there was internal bleeding. Phone was gone, fallen out of her pocket during the drop, lost somewhere in the rocks below. She was alone, broken, bleeding, trapped on a ledge, 40 feet down a cliff in a national park where cell service didn't exist, and hikers rarely came. Her son had just tried to murder her, and he thought he'd succeeded. Margot stared up at the slice of sky visible through the pine branches above. The pain was extraordinary. Every breath felt like knives. Her leg was on fire, her head pounded, but under the pain, something else burned. Something that had been buried under 73 years of kindness and sacrifice and putting everyone else first. Rage, pure, clear, cold. She thought about every double shift she'd worked, every birthday she'd missed, every dream she'd postponed. All for him, all for Hector, the boy who'd just shoved her off a cliff. Margot had spent her entire life being nice, being understanding, being the person who sacrificed for others. The nurse who stayed late, the mother who gave everything, the woman who never complained. In that moment, lying broken on a ledge with her son's betrayal still ringing in her ears, something fundamental shifted inside her. Nice was done. Understanding was over. Sacrifice had ended. She was going to survive this. And when she did, Hector and Desiree would learn that the woman they'd tried to discard was far more dangerous than they'd ever imagined. Margot Holloway was 73 years old. She'd survived an absent father, a dead mother, a vanishing husband, and 40 years in emergency rooms where death visited daily. She would survive this too, and then she would make them pay. The sun moved across the sky above her. Pain became her entire world. Margot counted her breaths to stay conscious. 1, 2, 3. Keep going. Her nurse training kicked in through the fog. Assess, stabilize, survive. She couldn't move her left leg. Attempting to would likely cause more damage. The broken ribs meant shallow breathing only. Deep breaths might puncture a lung. But her right leg still worked. Her left arm still functioned. She could move. She had to move. Staying on this ledge meant dying here. Slowly. From exposure or infection or internal injuries she couldn't see. Margot rolled onto her right side. The movement sent lightning through her ribs. She bit down on her sleeve to keep from screaming. Tasted blood and dirt and pine. Her left leg dragged useless behind her. The pain was blinding. Best salute. She forced it into a box in her mind. Locked it away. She'd deal with it later. Right now she had to focus. The ledge stretched about 15 feet to her right, covered in pine needles and small branches. Beyond that, the rock face continued down. But there was a chance, slim, desperate, impossible, that she could reach the hiking trail that ran along the cliff base. She'd seen it on the map Desiree had shown in the car, a maintenance trail used by park rangers. If she could reach it, she had a chance. Inch by inch, Margot crawled. Her right hand dug into dirt and pine needles. Her right leg pushed. Her left side screamed. Her vision swam. Blood from her head wound dripped onto the rock beneath her. She crawled. Every movement was agony. Her broken ribs grated together. Her shattered leg left a trail of blood. Her broken fingers throbbed uselessly. She crawled. Time stopped meaning anything. The sun moved. Shadows shifted. Birds called overhead. The world continued while Margot Holloway dragged her broken body across rock and earth. She thought about Hector as a baby, his first steps, his first words. Mama, that's what he'd called her. Mama. She crawled. She thought about his 5th birthday party. Just the two of them. Cake from a box, candles from the dollar store. He'd hugged her so tight and said, "You're the best mama ever." She crawled. She thought about his high school graduation, how proud he'd looked in his cap and gown, how he'd found her in crowd and mouthed, "Thank you." She crawled. She thought about his wedding, how he'd barely looked at her, how Desiree had smiled that cold smile. She crawled faster. Her hand hit something hard. Wood. Margot's blurred vision focused. A trail marker. Faded green paint on weathered wood. An arrow pointing right. She'd reached the maintenance trail. A sob escaped her throat. Relief and pain and rage all mixed together. She pulled herself onto the trail. Flat ground, wider than the ledge. Actual trail that meant people sometimes used it. Her body wanted to stop, to rest, to give in. But Margot had 40 years of nursing shifts where she'd worked 36 hours straight. She knew how to push past the body's limits, how to function on nothing but will. She crawled another 20 yards down the trail, around a bend, and then she heard it. Voices. Young. American. Worried. Oh my God, is that a person? Margot tried to call out. Her voice came out as a croak. She tried again. Help. Footsteps running. 2 hikers appeared. A couple. Maybe late 20s. Their faces went white when they saw her. Jesus Christ. The man dropped to his knees beside her. Ma'am, what happened? Fell. Margot's voice was barely audible. Cliff, broken. Need help. The woman already had her phone out. No service. I'll run back to the ranger station. It's half a mile. She took off sprinting. The man stayed. He pulled off his jacket and laid it over Margot. His hands hovered, wanty to help, but trained enough to know not to move someone with spinal injuries. What's your name? He asked. Margot. Holloway. I'm Derek. My girlfriend Shayna went for help. You're going to be okay. Just stay with me. Margot wanted to laugh. She was far from okay. But she was alive. That was more than Hector and Desiree had planned. How long were you out here? Derek asked. Margot tried to check her watch. It was gone. Lost in the fall. She looked at the sun's position. 2 hours, maybe 3. It had felt like years. You're incredibly lucky, Derek said. This trail doesn't get much use. We were only here because Shayna wanted to photograph wildflowers. Lucky. Margot closed her eyes. 73 years old, and she'd just been shoved off a cliff by her own son. Lucky wasn't the word she'd use. But alive? That worked. Shayna returned 23 minutes later with 2 park rangers. They had a medical kit and a radio. One ranger assessed Margot's injuries while the other called for emergency helicopter evacuation. Ma'am, we need to stabilize that leg before we move you, the first ranger said. Her name tag read Collins. This is going to hurt. I'm a nurse, Margot whispered. Retired, I know. Ranger Collins's eyes widened. That explains the tourniquet you made from your jacket sleeve. Smart thinking. Margot hadn't even realized she'd done it. Training ran deeper than consciousness. They splinted her leg with professional efficiency. Margot bit D. Own on a stick they offered and tried not to scream. The pain was transcendent, beyond anything she'd experienced. But she'd survived childbirth alone. She'd survived Raphael leaving. She'd survived 40 years of death and tragedy in hospital corridors. She'd survived this. Helicopter arrived 37 minutes later. The sound of rotors cutting through mountain air was the most beautiful thing Margot had ever heard. They loaded her onto a stretcher, strapped her down, lifted her into the sky. As the helicopter rose, Margot caught a glimpse of the cliff she'd fallen from, the overlook where her son had pushed her, the drop that should have killed her. She was alive, and Hector had no idea. Montana General Hospital received the call at 2:43 p.m. Trauma patient incoming. Female, 73. Multiple fractures, possible head trauma, found at Glacier National Park. The emergency room mobilized. Dr. Sarah Chen was on duty. She'd been working trauma for 15 years, had seen everything from car accidents to bear attacks. But when the helicopter landed and they rolled Margot Holloway through the doors, something about this case felt different. The woman was conscious, alert. Her injuries were severe, but her vital signs were remarkably stable. And her eyes, there was something in her eyes that didn't match the profile of a hiking accident victim. Mrs. Holloway, Dr. Chen said as they cut away her bloody clothes. Can you tell me what happened? Margot's eyes lock. Ked on hers. Clear, focused, burning with something that made Dr. Chen pause. I fell off a cliff at Glacier. How did you fall? Margot's jaw tightened. I was pushed. The room went silent. Nurses stopped moving. A respiratory therapist looked up from preparing equipment. Dr. Chen leaned closer. Pushed? By my son. Margot's voice was steady, cold as winter stone. He tried to kill me. Him and his wife. They think I'm dead. Dr. Chen glanced at the head nurse. The head nurse was already moving toward the phone. This was now a police matter. They worked on Margot for 2 hours. Set her leg with plates and screws, wrapped her ribs, stitched her head wound, splinted her fingers, 4 fluids and pain medication and antibiotics to prevent infection. Through it all, Margot stayed conscious, watching, planning. At 4:47 p.m., 2 police officers arrived, Detective Morris and Detective Reeves. They stood beside Margot's bed in the ICU, notebooks out. Mrs. Holloway, Detective Morris said gently. The doctors say you claim this wasn't an accident. It wasn't. Margot's voice was stronger now. The pain medication had taken the edge off. My son Hector Mendoza pushed me off the cliff at mile marker 4 on the Grinnell Glacier Trail. His wife Desiree was there. She was filming it. The detectives exchanged glances. That's a serious accusation, Detective Reeves said. It's the truth. Margot looked at them. They think I'm dead. They've probably already filed a missing person report, playing the worried family. Detective Morris pulled out his phone, made a call, stepped into the hallway. He returned 5 minutes later. His expression had changed, harder, more focused. Mrs. Holloway, there's a missing person report filed for you. Your son called it in at 2:15 p.m. Says you wandered off during a hike at Glacier. He's at the Kalispell station right now. Has been there for over an hour. Margot smiled. It was not a kind smile. Of course he is, playing the devastated son. He's been calling constantly trying to get updates, Detective Reeves added. Phone's been ringing nonstop for 20 minutes. Don't tell him I'm alive yet. Margot's voice was sharp. Command, not request. I want to tell him myself. Dr. Chen stepped forward. Mrs. Holloway, I spent 40 years as a trauma nurse. Margot cut her off. I know my rights. I'm conscious. I'm competent. I want to make a phone call. The detectives looked at each other. This was highly irregular, but the woman had been pushed off a cliff by her own son. If anyone deserved irregular, it was her. All right, Detective Morris said slowly. We'll set it up. At the Kalispell police station, Hector Mendoza sat in a plastic chair and tried to breathe. His phone was in his hand. It had been ringing for 23 minutes straight. Unknown number. Over and over. Desiree paced nearby. Her designer shoes clicked on linoleum. Her perfect composure was starting to crack. Mascara smudged. Lipstick chewed off. Who keeps calling you? She'd asked this 4 times already. Her voice was getting shriller. I don't know. Hector stared at the phone. His thumb hovered over the answer button. Something in his chest felt wrong, heavy, like he was drowning. The officer across from them was watching closely, too closely. Mr. Mendoza, why don't you answer it? Might be the Rangers with an update. Hector looked up. The officer's expression was neutral, but his eyes were sharp. Cop eyes, watching, judging. The phone rang again. Answer it, Desiree hissed. Hector's hand shook as he pressed the button, raised the phone to his ear. Hello? Silence on the other end. Not empty silence. Breathing. Someone was there. Then a voice, calm, familiar, impossible. Hello, son. The blood drained from Hector's face so fast he swayed in his chair. The officer leaned forward, concerned. Mom? The word came out as a whisper. Across the room, Desiree froze. Her face went white. Surprised to hear from me? Margot's voice was steady, almost pleasant, like they were discussing the weather. I imagine you are. You thought I was dead. Mom, where are you? What happened? We've been looking everywhere. Stop. The word cracked like a whip. Don't lie to me. Not now. I heard everything, Hector. Every word on that cliff. You and Desiree discussing how you'd tell the police I wandered off. How by the time anyone found me, it would be too late. Hector's vision, too. Knelled. The room spun. This couldn't be happening. She fell 200 feet. No one survived that. I'm at Montana General Hospital, Margot continued. The police are with me now. I've told them everything. About the push, about Desiree filming, about how you left me there to die. Desiree grabbed the phone from Hector's hand, pressed it to her ear. This is ridiculous. She fell. It was an accident. She wandered off. Desiree. Margot's laugh was sharp, bitter. You forgot something. During your rush to leave, you dropped your phone on the trail. The park rangers found it. They found your video, the one you took of my son pushing me. Desiree's knees buckled. She grabbed the table to stay upright. The phone clattered to the floor. Hector stared at it, at the officers who were now standing, at Desiree whose perfect face had crumbled into something ugly and terrified. Hector Mendoza, Desiree Mendoza, Detective Morris said, stepping into the room. You're both under arrest for attempted murder. Hector didn't fight, didn't run, just sat there as they read him his rights, put the cuffs on, led him away. In his mind, all he could see was his mother's face. The way she'd looked at him on that cliff, the trust in her eyes turning to confusion, to horror. He'd killed that trust, killed that love. And for what? For money that didn't exist. For a woman who'd used him like a tool and discarded him just as easily. He thought about his mother lying broken somewhere. Somehow. Alive. Somehow surviving what he'd done. And he realized, for the first time in 18 months, what Desiree had turned him into: a monster. Margot Holloway spent 8 weeks in Montana General Hospital. The first week was critical. Infection risk, internal bleeding risk, the possibility that her injuries were more severe than initially believed. But she'd been a nurse for 40 years. She knew how to be a patient, how to follow orders, how to heal. Her leg required 3 surgeries. The compound fracture had been severe. Bone fragments, muscle damage. The surgeons said she might never walk normally again. Margot heard might and decided it meant challenge accepted. Physical therapy started week 3. It was brutal. Every movement agony, every step impossible. The therapist pushed her hard. She pushed herself harder. By week 6 she was walking with a cane. By week 8 she was walking without one, though the limp would probably never go away completely. The broken ribs healed on their own. The fingers healed crooked but functional. The head wound left a scar above her left eyebrow that she'd carry forever. Battle scars, she thought. Proof of survival. The trial happened 4 months later. Hector and Desiree had separate lawyers. They tried to claim accident, miscommunication. Margot had tripped. They'd panicked. But the evidence was overwhelming. Desiree's phone had been recovered from the trail, just as Margot said. On it, the video. Crystal clear footage of Margot standing at the cliff edge. Hector approaching, his hands extending. The push. Desiree had meant to delete it later. Had forgotten in her panic when they left. That single oversight destroyed their entire defense. Text messages between Desiree and Hector laid out the plan in detail. The debt, the manipulation, the decision to take Margot to Glacier, the specific trail, the overlook with no guardrail. Financial records showed the debt Desiree had accumulated, the pressure she'd put on Hector, the lies about Margot's supposed hidden wealth. Margot testified for 3 hours, calm, precise. She described 40 years of sacrifice, of love, of building a life for her son. She described the hike, the cliff, the push, the fall, the voices overhead discussing her death like it was a business transaction. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes, guilty on all counts. Hector received 25 years for attempted murder. Desiree received 30 for conspiracy and planning. Margot sat in the courtroom and watched them led away in chains. Hector looked back once. Their eyes met. His were full of tears and something that might have been remorse. Margot felt nothing. The boy she'd raised, the son she'd loved, was gone. Had maybe never existed. What walked away in handcuffs was a stranger who'd worn her son's face while planning her murder. After the trial, Margot sold her house in Montana. Too many memories, too many ghosts. She moved to a small coastal town in Oregon, bought a cottage with an ocean view, used the money from the house sale and a settlement from Desiree's family, who'd paid to keep their name out of the tabloids. The town was quiet, friendly, full of people who'd lived full lives and were content with simple pleasures. Morning coffee, sunset walks, friendly waves from neighbors. Margot found peace there. Not the kind she'd known before. That peace had been built on the illusion of family and love. This was different, harder, earned. She started volunteering at the local women's shelter, helping abuse survivors, women who'd been betrayed by people who claimed to love them. She understood that now in ways she never had before. She also started a support group for elder abuse survivors. Turns out, children trying to take advantage of aging parents was disturbingly common. Financial abuse, emotional manipulation. Sometimes worse. Margot shared her story. Others shared theirs. They healed together in ways individual therapy never could. 6 months after moving to Oregon, Margot received a letter, prison stationery, Hector's handwriting. She almost threw it away unread, but curiosity, or maybe the ghost of who she used to be, made her open it. Inside were 3 pages of apologies, explanations, desperate pleas for understanding, for forgiveness. He wrote about Desiree's manipulation, how she'd poisoned his mind, how he'd been drowning in debt and fear and pressure, how he'd never meant to hurt her, how he loved Her. Margot read it twice. Then she wrote back. One sentence on expensive stationery. You don't get to be forgiven for attempted murder just because you failed. She never heard from him again. A year after the trial, Margot was at the grocery store when a young woman approached her. Early 30s, nervous smile. You're Margot Holloway, aren't you, from the trial? Margot tensed. She tried to stay out of the media. The story had made national news. Son pushes mother off cliff. She survives and testifies. But she declined all interviews. I am, she said carefully. The woman's eyes filled with tears. My father has been financially abusing my mother for years, taking her Social Security, controlling her money. I saw your case and it gave me the courage to report him. He's being investigated now. Because of you. She grabbed Margot's hand. Thank you. For surviving. For fighting back. For showing us we don't have to accept abuse just because it comes from family. Margot stood in the pasta aisle of a grocery store and felt something crack open in her chest. Not pain. Something else. Purpose, maybe. She'd spent 73 years being defined by other people's needs. The nurse who healed, the mother who sacrificed, the woman who gave everything. Now, at 75, she was something different. A survivor, a fighter, a woman who'd fallen 200 feet and climbed back up to reclaim her life. That evening, Margot stood on her cottage deck, watching the sun set over the Pacific. The ocean stretched forever. Waves crashed against rocks. Seabirds called overhead. Her leg ached. Her ribs hurt when the weather changed. The scar above her eyebrow caught the light. But she was alive, and she had learned something that 40 years of nursing had never taught her. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Some people don't deserve second chances. And that's okay. Family wasn't blood, wasn't DNA, wasn't the people who shared your name. Family was the women at her shelter who showed up for each other, the support group members who held space for pain, the young woman in the grocery store who found courage in someone else's survival. Family was whoever you chose, and who chose you back. Margot Holloway had been pushed off a cliff by the person she loved most in the world. She'd survived, and in surviving she discovered that she was so much stronger than anyone, including herself, had ever imagined. If you've ever sacrificed everything for someone who threw it back in your face, listen closely. Your worth was never in their hands. It was always in yours. If you've ever been treated like you're invisible, like your love and sacrifice meant nothing, you still have power. More power than the people who tried to discard you will ever understand. To anyone fighting their own battle right now, anyone who's been betrayed by the people who are supposed to protect you, your comeback is already being written. You're not finished. You're just getting started. Every setback is setting you up for something greater. Stay quiet, stay sharp, and let your actions speak. What lesson hit you hardest from Margot's story? And if you were in her shoes, what would you have done differently? Would you have forgiven Hector, or would you have done exactly what she did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't stop here. Click the next video on your screen right now and watch another powerful story from our channel. We share stories of survival, justice, and quiet strength every single week. And if this story moved you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another one. Your story might be next. Let me know in the comments what you thought, and I'll see you in the next video.